A rich man sat alone, tears rolling down his face, until a waitress placed an envelope in front of him and whispered, "This was your father's." What he found inside changed everything. The low hum of the restaurant felt distant to Adrian, though the clinking of cutlery and murmured conversations surrounded him. He sat slouched over the polished mahogany table, a neatly folded napkin pressed against his eyes, trying to muffle the trembling that he couldn't stop. Tears slid down without ceremony, his hand shaking as he wiped at his face, the weight of years pressing down like an invisible vice. Despite the crystal glasses and the soft candlelight, nothing could mask the emptiness gnawing at him. A waitress approached cautiously, balancing a tray with practiced ease. She hesitated when she noticed his trembling hands and the tightness in his shoulders. "Are you okay, sir?" she asked softly, unsure whether to step closer or leave him alone. Her voice was gentle, yet carried a quiet curiosity, sensing this wasn't ordinary sorrow. Adrian didn't answer. Words felt useless. All he could do was sit there, staring at the table, at the polished wood reflecting the dim chandelier above. Images from the past flickered unbidden across his mind. He saw his father's stern eyes watching him struggle with his first bike, the way he had been pushed to excel in school, the endless lessons in responsibility that felt like chains at the time. He remembered his father working late nights while Adrian slept, sacrifices Adrian had never noticed, moments of care hidden behind a rigid exterior. He had resented the strictness then, unaware of the quiet love beneath it. Even now, seated in a room that could host royalty, surrounded by wealth that should have filled him with pride, Adrian felt hollow. Money, accolades, and power meant nothing if there was no one to share the weight, no one to witness the man he had become. Success had been a distant echo of his father's expectations, but the silence where his father's voice used to be was deafening. The waitress returned, stepping lightly and setting an envelope before him. Its cream-colored paper seemed out of place in the sleek modernity around him, yet somehow perfectly meant for this moment. Her hand lingered a fraction longer than necessary, and with a gentle voice, she said, "This was your father's." Adrian froze, his hand hovering above the envelope. The air seemed to thicken. Every heartbeat echoed in his ears. He felt the old ache of longing and the sudden pang of anticipation collide in a dizzying mix. Could this really be a message meant only for him? Or was it just another piece of a life he thought he understood? He stared at the envelope, torn between fear and longing. Opening it felt like stepping into a memory he wasn't sure he was ready to confront. The candle flickered, the restaurant noise softened, and Adrian realized that this single piece of paper could change everything. For a long moment, he just sat there, breath shallow, hands frozen, caught in the delicate, unbearable tension of what was to come. Adrian's hands shook as he picked up the envelope. The cream-colored paper felt heavier than it should have, as if it carried not just words, but years of unsaid things. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the flap, heart pounding in his chest. Each second stretched painfully, his mind racing through a lifetime of memories, of birthdays ignored, lessons misunderstood, and a father whose love had always been wrapped in expectation rather than warmth. Finally, he tore it open. The letter inside was in his father's familiar, precise handwriting, the ink slightly faded but still clear. Adrian's eyes skimmed the first lines, but he could not suppress the tremor in his hands or the tightness in his throat. The words were at once tender and unforgiving. His father wrote about regrets, about missed moments and words that had gone unspoken. He confessed to not always knowing the right way to show love, acknowledging the sacrifices he had made in silence, the nights he had worked endlessly to secure Adrian's future while missing milestones Adrian had counted on him to attend. As he read further, the letter shifted in tone. His father described a secret trust he had established, one that went far beyond mere wealth. It was not about bank accounts, property, or status. Instead, it was a project designed to challenge Adrian, to push him toward understanding responsibility, integrity, and the kind of character his father had always hoped to instill. The letter included directions, subtle and cryptic, pointing to a location Adrian would need to visit, tasks he would need to complete, and lessons he would need to internalize before claiming the legacy. Memories surged unbidden, images of his father hunched over ledgers, balancing work and family obligations, the quiet evenings when Adrian had wanted attention but received lectures on discipline instead. The weight of those years pressed down on him as he realized how little he had truly understood the man who had given him everything, yet demanded so much in return. Tears blurred his vision, but they were different now, tears of comprehension, not just loss. His father's words cut deeper than Adrian expected. This inheritance, this carefully orchestrated trust, wasn't about wealth. It was about molding him into someone who could carry forward a vision bigger than himself. The letter outlined challenges that would demand courage, empathy, and reflection, a path to becoming the man his father had quietly hoped he would be. Then came the final lines, a twist that caught Adrian off guard. His father hinted at a hidden location, a place filled with personal artifacts, documents, and perhaps more secrets, an invitation to uncover the last piece of his father's plan. The letter ended not with a signature, but with a simple, almost playful note, "Find this, and you'll understand everything I meant to teach you." Adrian sat back in his chair, breath uneven, staring at the envelope and the letter. The restaurant's ambient noise seemed distant now, the world narrowed down to this single moment. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of purpose ignite in his chest. The journey wasn't just about wealth or legacy, it was about reconciliation, understanding, and finally seeing his father not just as a stern man, but as a guide whose last gift would test and shape him in ways he had never imagined. He folded the letter carefully, slipping it into his jacket, and whispered to himself, "I'm coming, Dad. I'll find it." The tremor in his hands was still there, but now it carried determination, not despair. Adrian stepped out of the restaurant into the cool evening air, the city lights reflecting in puddles from a recent rain. The envelope pressed against his chest felt heavier than ever, as if it contained not only his father's words but the weight of every missed moment, every regret he had buried under ambition. He walked slowly, letting the sounds of distant traffic and muffled conversations blur into the background, his mind already slipping into the past. He remembered his father's voice, calm yet firm, guiding him through the simplest of lessons: how to tie a shoelace properly, how to balance his allowance, how to treat people with respect even when they faltered. Family dinners came to life in his memory. The smell of roasted chicken, the way his father silently carved the meat, his mother's laughter filling the room while he sulked over some trivial injustice. Arguments too came back, sharp and bitter, usually over homework or responsibility. At the time, he had bristled against the constraints, thinking his father didn't understand him. Now, he could see the care woven into each admonishment, the intention behind the discipline. Adrian's chest tightened with a mix of pride and guilt. He had worked tirelessly to climb the ladder of success, building his empire while his father's health declined, while the lessons meant to shape him into a man of integrity were often ignored. Each step forward in wealth and status had been accompanied by a step away from his father, away from the quiet wisdom he had once taken for granted. The realization stung, and his eyes welled again, a combination of sorrow and frustration. He hated himself for the selfishness, yet he couldn't help the pangs of pride that whispered he had made it, though the victory now felt hollow. As he wandered past familiar streets, his gaze fell on a small antique shop window, cluttered with relics of another era. Something inside caught his eye, a toy car, chipped and faded, identical to the one he had cherished as a child. Memories flooded back, his father teaching him to polish it, to care for it, telling him that small things mattered because they were practice for bigger responsibilities. The toy had been a symbol of his father's quiet guidance, a lesson hidden in play. Adrian realized, with a sudden jolt, that the envelope he now carried likely connected to this memory, a bridge between the man he had been and the man he was meant to become. A tear slipped down his cheek, unheeded, as he clenched the envelope tighter. The nostalgia was painful, but it was also awakening something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose and direction. The past, with all its love and mistakes, was not just a memory to mourn. It was a map, a guidepost left by a father who had wanted him to see beyond wealth, beyond ambition, to the value of life itself. Adrian whispered into the night, almost to himself, almost to the memory of his father, "I understand now. I'll make this right." The city around him moved on, indifferent, but he felt a small, determined flame ignite within him. A readiness to follow the path his father had set, to discover the meaning behind the legacy that had waited patiently all these years. Adrian closed the door to his apartment and took a deep breath, the envelope still clutched in his hand. The letter had laid out a path, cryptic yet purposeful, and he knew he could no longer ignore it. He hailed a cab, giving the driver an address tucked away in his father's precise handwriting, a location he had not thought of in years, the old family estate on the outskirts of the city. The journey felt surreal. The streets blurred past him as his mind replayed the echoes of his father's voice, calm, insistent, and guiding. Arriving at the estate, Adrian was struck by the contrast between memory and reality. The gates were overgrown with ivy, the paint on the grand doors faded and chipped. Yet the place felt alive with echoes of the past, the kind of energy that refused to be erased by time. He stepped forward, the crunch of gravel beneath his shoes loud in the stillness, and pushed open the heavy front door. A faint scent of polished wood and old leather greeted him, familiar and comforting, yet tinged with melancholy. Inside, the estate was both labyrinthine and welcoming, corridors twisting in ways that reminded him of childhood hide-and-seek games. The letter had hinted at challenges, tests, almost, and he soon discovered them. A locked cabinet in the study bore his father's unmistakable cipher. Books arranged in a particular sequence concealed hidden compartments. Drawers had to be opened in precise order. Each obstacle felt like a puzzle designed not to frustrate, but to teach, to demand patience, observation, and respect for the details his father had valued so deeply. Adrian paused at a particularly difficult lock, fumbling with the combination. The frustration bubbled up, mingled with a gnawing self-doubt. Do I deserve this? He wondered. Have I earned the right to claim anything my father left me? The questions weighed on him, heavier than any lock or key. And then he heard it, or perhaps remembered it. A snippet of his father's voice, precise and calm, echoing in his memory. Measure twice, act once. The work we do is only as good as the care we give to every step. He tried again, this time slower, methodically, letting his father's words guide him. Each turn of the combination, each careful movement, felt like a conversation across time. He felt both the pressure of expectation and the strange comfort of guidance, as if his father was beside him, insisting that he pay attention, that he understand. As he progressed through the estate, finding hidden keys and secret letters tucked behind paintings, Adrian's mind churned with guilt and admiration. His father's exacting nature had been exasperating as a boy, but now he recognized it as a blueprint, a map to becoming more than he had ever imagined. Yet doubt lingered. Am I strong enough? Patient enough? Good enough to honor him? By the time he reached the grand study, with its towering shelves and dusty windows, Adrian realized that the journey itself was the lesson. The legacy wasn't waiting for him at the end, it was being built with every careful, deliberate step he took, guided by memory, intention, and the invisible hand of a father who had never truly left him. With a steadying breath, he pressed forward, ready to uncover whatever final secret awaited him, knowing that each challenge was shaping him into someone worthy of the man his father had hoped he would become. Adrian pushed open the final door at the back of the estate, a room tucked behind an old bookshelf that had once served as a secret passage during his childhood games. Dust motes danced in the thin rays of sunlight filtering through the cracked windows, illuminating a scene frozen in time. In the center sat a chest, its brass hinges tarnished, the wood scarred from years of neglect. Heart-pounding, he knelt and lifted the lid, revealing a treasure trove of personal mementos. Journals bound in worn leather, photographs yellowed with age, carefully folded letters, and even a few of his father's old inventions, blueprints and prototypes, meticulously labeled in precise handwriting. He picked up the first journal and began to read. Each page was filled with reflections he had never imagined his father would share. Thoughts on love, regret over missed moments, lessons learned from failure, and quiet admissions of fear about raising a son he worried might never understand him. The words pierced Adrian's heart, each sentence unraveling layers of guilt and longing he hadn't fully confronted. He saw his father not just as the man of authority he remembered, but as a human being, fallible, hopeful, and endlessly devoted. Tears stung his eyes as he read a passage that made him choke with emotion. His father had always believed in Adrian, even when Adrian had doubted himself, even when he had chosen ambition over connection. You have the strength to be more than me, the journal read. Even if you cannot see it now, I see it in you. The realization washed over Adrian like a wave. His father's trust had never been conditional, and the love behind his sternness had been steady, unwavering. But the moment of catharsis was interrupted by a pang of tension. A small folder tucked into the chest contained legal documents he hadn't expected. Notices of pending challenges to the trust, disputes from distant relatives questioning his inheritance. Adrian's stomach tightened. The weight of corporate obligations, lawsuits, and the intricate web of his father's empire threatened to undo the emotional journey he had just begun. Doubt crept in again. Could he honor his father's legacy amid such complications? Then, amid the papers, he found a folded envelope marked simply with his mother's handwriting. Inside was a letter he hadn't anticipated, urging him to reconnect with estranged family and old friends. His father's intentions were clearer now. Wealth and possessions were meaningless without the connections that give life meaning. The envelope contained phone numbers, addresses, even a brief note encouraging reconciliation and healing, a final reminder that the true inheritance was not money or property, but relationships and love that had been neglected. Adrian leaned back against the wall, letting the journals and letters spread out before him. A storm of emotions churned inside: sorrow for lost time, relief for understanding at last, and a quiet determination to act. He realized the journey was far from over. The path his father had set for him was not just about claiming a fortune, but about reclaiming the man he had lost to pride and ambition. He took a deep breath, the letters clutched to his chest, and whispered to himself, "I'll make this right. I'll honor you, Dad, in every way you imagined." For the first time in years, the weight of regret felt like a guide, not a burden, pushing him toward redemption and connection. Adrian drove through the city streets with a mix of apprehension and determination, the letters and journals from the estate stacked neatly in the passenger seat. Each name in the envelope he had found, a sibling he hadn't spoken to in years, old friends who had drifted away, even estranged business partners, felt like a door he had long avoided opening. Now, he resolved to face them, to rebuild what he had allowed ambition and pride to erode. The first reunion was quiet, almost awkward. His younger sister, Emma, met him at a small cafe, her eyes wary. Adrian's voice trembled slightly as he began, "I know I've been absent, and I've let distance grow where it shouldn't have. I'm sorry." Emma's lips quivered, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Then, slowly, the walls between them softened. Tears, laughter, and long-held confessions poured out over coffee and pastries. Adrian felt the tight knot of guilt loosen, replaced with a fragile but real connection. Next were the friends from childhood, those who had drifted as he pursued wealth. He visited old haunts, the park where they had played, the small bookstore where they had spent afternoons. Each encounter was a mix of apology and explanation, but also of gratitude, for their patience, for their memories, for their enduring presence despite his absence. Adrian realized the magnitude of what his father had intended. The inheritance was never about the ledger or bank account. It was about human connection, about leaving a legacy of love, trust, and care, not just wealth. Walking through the old family home, now vacant and echoing with memories, Adrian saw it differently. The furniture, the faded wallpaper, even the creaking floorboards held the lessons his father had embedded in daily life: patience, responsibility, respect. He imagined his father in the kitchen, quietly correcting a crooked picture frame or reminding him to finish his homework. Cinematic images flashed in his mind, sunlight streaming through the windows, dust motes dancing like tiny ghosts of the past, Adrian finally understanding the weight of every quiet gesture, every unspoken lesson. Yet even as he rebuilt bridges, a subtle tension lingered. Among the journals and letters, he discovered a folded slip of paper he had missed before, tucked deep in a hidden compartment of his father's desk. The message was cryptic: "The final key is not here, but within those you trust most." It hinted at a deeper secret, one that had been waiting for him all along, something beyond reconciliation, beyond wealth, something that would test not his intellect, but his heart. Adrian held the paper carefully, letting the meaning settle in. The legacy was unfolding in layers: first understanding, then forgiveness, now connection, and finally, a challenge that would demand all he had learned, all he had felt, all he had become. He looked around the empty house once more, inhaling the familiar scent of aged wood and sunlight, feeling the presence of his father in every corner. A quiet resolve took root in him. He would honor the past, nurture the present, and prepare for the final revelation that lay ahead, wherever it waited, just beyond the horizon of memory and love. Adrian arrived at the small, secluded cabin his father had mentioned in the letter, perched on a hill overlooking the city skyline. The fading sunlight cast long shadows across the weathered wood, and the golden hues painted the landscape with a warmth that made the air feel almost sacred. His heartbeat quickened as he pushed open the cabin door, stepping into a space that seemed frozen in time, untouched since his father had last been there. In the center of the room sat a desk, neatly organized, with a single envelope resting on top. Adrian approached it with reverence, hands trembling. The envelope was heavier than it looked, and when he opened it, he found not just a letter, but a full blueprint for a foundation his father had envisioned, one dedicated to helping children learn, to supporting families, and to creating opportunities for those overlooked by society. Alongside the plans were personal notes, written in his father's careful hand, explaining the philosophy behind it: that true wealth was measured not in dollars or possessions, but in the lives one touched and the integrity one upheld. Adrian sank into the chair, reading slowly, absorbing every word. For the first time, he fully understood the depth of his father's vision. Every strict lesson, every absence, every hard truth he had once resented now made sense. His father had been shaping him to see beyond ambition, beyond pride, beyond the hollow satisfaction of material success. The legacy wasn't money, it was love, humility, and the responsibility to leave the world better than he had found it. Tears flowed freely now, unrestrained. Adrian's shoulders shook, his body trembling with the release of years of grief, guilt, and misunderstanding. He sobbed openly, not from loss, but from the profound clarity of understanding. His father had given him the ultimate gift, the knowledge that life was measured not in achievements alone, but in empathy, kindness, and the courage to do what was right. He stepped outside as the sun dipped lower, the city skyline glowing in shades of orange and pink. Adrian held a small object his father had left, a simple, polished compass, engraved with a message, "Find your true north." The symbolic weight struck him immediately. It was a reminder that while guidance could be given, the journey itself required heart, integrity, and choice. The compass connected the past to the present, a tangible thread linking his father's life, his own mistakes, and the man he was becoming. As he looked over the city, the wind brushing against his face, Adrian felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had transformed him. He had confronted regret, rebuilt broken connections, and finally seen the man his father truly was, a man who had loved deeply, guided patiently, and left a path not of wealth, but of wisdom and compassion. The sun sank behind the horizon, casting the city in twilight. Adrian clutched the compass to his chest, whispering softly, "I understand now, Dad. I'll carry this forward." The moment was cinematic, timeless, and complete, a man reconciled with his past, ready to honor the legacy not with possessions, but with love, integrity, and purpose. Adrian stood in the modest office of the new foundation, sunlight streaming through the tall windows, dust motes dancing like tiny sparks of hope. The space buzzed quietly with activity, volunteers arranging books, children laughing softly in the corner, families receiving guidance and support. Every detail reflected the vision his father had entrusted to him, every corner infused with purpose beyond wealth or status. He watched for a moment, letting the magnitude of it sink in. This was more than a project, it was a living testament to the lessons he had once resisted, now brought vividly to life. He picked up the polished compass his father had left him, the engraved words catching the morning light, "Find your true north." Adrian held it close, remembering the journey, the tears in the restaurant, the hidden estate, the letters and journals, the reunions, the revelations. Each step had shaped him, had stripped away pride and impatience, leaving only clarity, empathy, and a quiet strength he hadn't realized he possessed. As he placed the compass on the foundation's desk, the familiar sound of soft footsteps drew his attention. The waitress from the restaurant appeared, now casually dressed, yet with the same gentle curiosity in her eyes. She smiled, a subtle acknowledgement passing between them, unspoken but understood. She didn't need to ask, and he didn't need to explain. She had witnessed the spark of transformation in that quiet moment months ago, and now she saw its fruition in the man who had finally embraced his father's legacy. Adrian walked through the foundation, greeting volunteers and families with a calm, measured presence, a man fully aware of both his past mistakes and the path he now chose to follow. He had reconciled with his sister, reconnected with old friends, and mended ties he had once allowed to fracture. Each act of care, each gentle word and thoughtful decision, felt like a tribute to the father who had quietly guided him, whose wisdom had waited patiently until Adrian was ready to receive it. He paused outside, watching the children play in the courtyard, laughter echoing against the brick walls. The city skyline stretched beyond, glimmering in the golden light of late afternoon, a reminder of the world he had once chased for wealth and status alone. Now, it seemed smaller, gentler, defined not by ambition but by the connections he nurtured, the lives he touched, and the lessons he carried forward. Adrian allowed himself a long, deep breath. The weight of regret had lifted, replaced by a quiet joy, a reflective calm that had nothing to do with fortune or fame. He smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in years. The journey had ended, yet it had also just begun, the legacy of love, humility, and integrity flowing outward, touching hearts in ways money never could. He looked down at the compass one last time, then out at the world beyond the foundation, and whispered softly, almost to himself, "Some treasures aren't counted in dollars, but in the love we finally see."